Working on it.
Okay.
Surviving at least. Welcome back. As I just went over a few minutes, a couple of seconds, and around 17 frames ago, things are well and truly fucked at the moment. Tensions are rising, cities are on fire, and there's not too much hope of changing things for the better anytime soon, unless someone in the audience happens to be named Luigi.
I'm a Luigi.
It's Luigi time.
It's Luigi.
However, in these times of hardship, I still think it's important to keep together and protect you and yours, to take care of those closest to you and those who need a bit of help along the way. All of which is made 10 times more difficult when you've got balding white boys across the internet yapping about being lone wolves and breaking away from the woke mob to be a Sigma male.
Shit.
Because we can't go 5 seconds without a fan of some misogynistic podcast starting a flame war.
Or a podcast. Just saying.
Distractable's good, but a lot of the other ones not great. So here's the thing. Toxic masculinity and all the behaviors and media that go along with it is a downward spiral of misogyny, self-hatred, and long-term mental and financial decline. And I know you may be thinking, no shit, Zan, that's why I spend my Thanksgiving at home. And I hear you. Personally, I cannot stand the whole alpha sigma male hypermasculine cliche that has taken hold in parts of online culture. It's irritating, annoying, and just plain fucking sad at this point.
It is very sad.
However, just because something is twisted and grotesque beyond measure doesn't mean it's not worthy of study.
Was that a Trump penis reference?
No.
Nobody wants to think about that.
No.
So first, let's start with defining the crux of this issue, toxic masculinity. A lot of information on this can be found in the journal Psychology of Men and Masculinities, in particular an article titled Social Media Behavior, Toxic Masculinity, and Depression. First, they put emphasis on the baseline societal influences in what they call hegemonic masculinity. This refers to the mindset of restricting behaviors and practices based on power dynamics, gender roles, and traditional societal expectations to enforce the dominant paradigm in favor of men. From there, you have toxic masculinity as an offshoot from the hegemonic type. This mentality involves the need to aggressively compete with and dominate others to assert one's own manhood. I think this is an important way to look at male toxic aggression since it establishes the context of the issue. Misogyny doesn't happen in a vacuum, after all. Although, if you told me Joe Rogan scripts were generated by an AI composed entirely of 4chan posts, I'd probably believe you.
Yeah.
Regardless, the key to toxic masculinity is a drive to dominate others of a perceived lower social station, i.e. anyone who isn't cishet, white male, upper class, and built like a Marvel character. A need to get as close to that ideal as possible, and promote misogynistic and homophobic attitudes to bolster that need for identity. But let's dive a little deeper into this whole issue with a surprisingly complex question. What does masculinity mean? I mean, as you might have learned if you grew up in the golden age of cartoons, that's a very complicated question. But as with most things that get swept up by far-right shitheads, it seems to have been driven into a false dichotomy between two political extremes. On the one hand, you have those wanting a return to traditional masculinity, with men being stoic breadwinners with their eyes on the money and success above all else. And this is naturally followed by the same people wanting women back in their traditional roles of housekeeping and childbearing, all of which is, as the kids say, cringe as fuck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you have a purely feminist view of the matter, encouraging men to share their feelings, take on duties associated with so-called feminine roles, avoiding anything even close to toxic masculinity, and creating a more free interpretation of manhood. However, many sociologists and psychologists identify this as a perceived loss of identity and methods to build one, causing a lack of direction, which can also lead to stress and loneliness. The problem with both of these is the specificity and rigid gendered dichotomy, focusing on what masculinity strictly needs to be or what it absolutely needs to avoid. Furthermore, viewing male mental health through a holistic talk-based therapy lens might not be as effective as required due to the circumstances surrounding how manhood is presented. Unless you grew up with a healthy parental dynamic, positive influences, and examples in media, or in the best case, all of the above, young men can grow up without a clear, healthy idea of masculinity, or at a deeper level, their own identity. Without a clear framework to build off of, men can fall into bad mental and emotional habits that are hard to break. A large issue with talk therapy tackling men's mental health and getting to the root of emotions is the short-term effects involved in the process. While figuring out inner turmoil and negative emotions does lead to better mental stability in the long run, it also runs the risk of one sinking into the vulnerability that comes with it. Opening that floodgate is essential for relieving the pressure, but sometimes it's hard to close it back up again. With men, it can lead to them getting stuck in that mental vulnerability and feeling fragile and small as a result. Ultimately, this process leads to a better understanding of oneself, but in that time of weakness, it's easy for men to feel emasculated and, as a result, angry at themselves and the social forces that pushed them to that point. Now, while talk therapy and verbally working through emotions is not as effective in the same sense for men, it could work quite well if centered around a male desire to be needed. The center of the issue is around purpose or perception thereof, how one's purpose is changed and challenged, and how the individual reacts to that. Essentially, the male psyche is ingrained with a need to be needed. This turns into internal turmoil in 3 standout cases. 1, men whose purpose is challenged by shifts to the dominant paradigm or actions against it that end up feeling threatened. 2, men whose desired purpose is stripped away due to it being part of a larger societal problem, who may feel betrayed and lash out against those working for social justice. Or 3, men who lack purpose entirely and are easily persuaded and manipulated by organizations who want a large rallying force against those seeking social justice and equity. Much in the style of a cult, telling a directionless person that they are right and everyone else is wrong and giving them a purpose is a good way to get them to do whatever you want. And on that subject, I think it's time we address one of the biggest figureheads for the toxic masculine mindset. None other than Dollar General Lex Luthor himself, Andrew Tate. Now, if you don't know who I'm talking about here, congratulations. You either live a very classy life or you live under a rock. I mean, in this economy, both are a possibility. Andrew Tate is a social media influencer. Actually, no, scratch that.
No, influenza's right. Diseased.
Who made a rise to celebrity status through alpha male, hypermasculine, toxic shock content, particularly aimed at women, women's rights, feminism, gender roles, and stirring up controversy wherever possible. Any form of bro you can think of, he's covered it in obscene detail. Like crypto bros, dude bros, gym bros, and extreme fans of American Psycho and Joker all wank off to this dude's Twitter posts.
That's disgusting.
At least, until he got banned from most standard social media. Now, his primary mode of disseminating his content relies on subscribers to his advice forum called Hustlers University, which gives get-rich-quick tips and scams which he claims is fact.
That sounds dirty.
Yeah, you see, folks, this is why you should run your ideas past a Gen Xer and a Z or two, because Hustlers University sounds like anything from the Wish.com Playboy Mansion to Quick Tips with Uncle Touchy. Now, for that platform, subscribers are encouraged to repost clips and sound bites of his content wherever possible and spread those little nuggets of toxicity through their own followers. Despite Tate being banned from most social media platforms, this method is an indirect approach to get around such difficulties. Basically, if toxic masculinity had a face, Tate would be its profile picture on 4chan.
And I'd want to punch it.
Yep. Oh, well, that goes without saying.
Use your teleporter, Mammal.
Yeah.
Hey, Jew, use your teleporter.
No, for him, I'm getting the space laser.
Oh, yeah. I can orbit.
So, if Tate's only route for spreading his message is indirect back alley tactics, it shouldn't be too much of a problem, right? Unfortunately, no. The real problem is how this backwards-ass messaging is making its way into the social spheres of middle and high schoolers. Given that these are formative years for establishing basic social dynamics, figuring out how to conduct oneself with others, and cultivating a rare friendship or two, this is a very bad time to imprint toxic masculinity on young men. Furthermore, with this message making the rounds through Tate's Hustler University subscribers and other indirect means, as well as the prevalence of social media in young people's lives in the internet age, toxic masculinity and the iconoclasts that represent it are spreading under the radar of parents that could recognize this behavior and dissuade it. And the problem is, it's working. According to a 2023 study from anti-discrimination organization Hope Not Hate, 74% of males between ages 18 to 24 had consumed media from or related to Andrew Tate, and a little under half of participants viewed it in a positive light. At this rate, Tate, his followers, and every other sexist schmuck on the internet are getting more private exposure in schools than the average Republican congressman.
Oh, damn.
Oh, damn, Matt Gates, gross.
Yep.
What a Gertie.
And this all goes back to what I was talking about earlier in regard to vulnerability in the male psyche. When confronting one's insecurities or sense of purpose, it can leave one feeling exposed and vulnerable or without direction, which can be very easily influenced. Essentially, lacking purpose and being confused about where one fits into a more equitable society causes depression in young men. This then leaves them vulnerable to suggestion and being pulled into followings like Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, or any other hyper-masculine media empires. They tell these people that they're not wrong or out of place, but it is, in fact, the women, gay people, and all the SJWs of the world that are wrong and making life difficult for them. The viewers then emulate these ideals and behaviors, which function as maladaptive and hostile coping strategies that ultimately isolate them further into the toxic masculine pipeline. From there, the cycle starts all over again, only getting worse as time goes on. I like to think of it as the plastics conundrum. Classic Mean Girls, not the shitty musical reboot.
That thing ate so much
Yeah.
ass.
I only got the,
Ate the
like,
butt out of a
16-minute
dead donkey is
mark.
what it did.
It did. It was so fucking awful.
Anyway, there's a perceived hierarchy for a given society, whether high school or the world, as presented by the apparent elite of that setting. There's an entire laundry list of what you can and cannot do, look like, earn, read, watch, listen to, or feel. If you stick to the program, you're praised by the in-group and are encouraged to spread those ideals to others. If you stray outside these lines, you're clearly one of the lesser members of society and don't deserve praise. The more one is ostracized from this in-group by these means, the more they'll grovel, pay, or proselytize to try and win the figurehead's affection back. Ultimately, the entire way of life and elitist attitude towards others is a facade to hide insecurities, weakness, and shame rather than working out why those issues arise and finding a way to move past them or live with them. Or, you could just use a bus. As a scholar and intellectual, hopefully, I think the best way to avoid this kind of toxic mindset is to just take a second to think about what you're consuming. Like, talk to some close friends or family, and if you're being an asshole, they'll let you know.
You're an asshole.
Yeah, I know that.
Okay.
Then apologize, which, as it turns out, is manly as fuck.
Yeah, it is, man.
Yeah, it is.
Say you're sorry.
Professional therapy is fine and all, but talking to someone in your life that you can trust is a good litmus test for dickishness levels. However, as a semi-professional comedian and someone who looks like he'd fit into Andrew Taint's target demographic,
Taint?
I advise y'all, seriously, I advise y'all weak-ass man-children to shut the fuck up and stop making me look bad in front of all the smart and eligible hotties.
Yeah.